One of the most intriguing and challenging concepts of Carl Jung's analytical psychology is the process of shadow projection. In this video essay, I want to explore what is meant by that term and show what role it can play in the most intimate area of our own lives, namely when we fall in love. Over the last years, there has been a significant resurgence of interest in the work of the Swiss psychologist Carl Jung. Born in the latter half of the 19th century, he was a contemporary of Sigmund Freud, with whom he had a close working relationship at first. However, due to Freud's dogmatic insistence on the singular importance of sexuality as a primary drive for human behavior and fundamentally differing worldviews, they parted ways, with Jung developing his own system of thought that he called analytical psychology. Many of the concepts he formulated now permeate our mainstream culture. Consider how often you've heard people describe their personality type as extroverted or introverted, or how notions like the collective unconscious and archetypes are frequently used in certain spiritual and psychological contexts. To best understand shadow projection, it is first necessary to understand what Carl Jung meant by the shadow. Often, when this term is brought up, people immediately equate the shadow with their capacity for evil and everything that is, quote, bad in themselves. This is a much too simplified and one-dimensional view, because a shadow refers to all parts of our psyche that are rejected and disowned. Not because they are inherently bad, but because they did not fit with the version of ourselves we learned to present to the world. As we grew up, our sense of self, what Jung called the ego, developed in response to the messages we got from our environment. We internalized that certain parts of ourselves were rewarded and acknowledged by our parents, our teachers, and the culture as a whole. These traits, maybe being helpful or quiet, were welcomed and thus became the identity we consciously inhabit. Inescapably though, there were those riskier emotions like grief and anger, or pride and joy, that evoke disapproval or just blank incomprehension from our parents' side. For a child, the natural response then is to repress these rejected emotions, as they endanger the connection with its caregivers, because attachment always outweighs authenticity, especially at a young age. However, those banished aspects of our being did not simply vanish. They were merely pushed out of sight, into the unconscious, where they aggregated and formed what Jung called the shadow. In his book, Owning Your Shadow, the Jungian analyst Robert A. Johnson writes, "It is astonishing to find that some very good characteristics turn up in the shadow. Generally, the ordinary, the mundane characteristics are the norm. Anything less goes into the shadow. But anything better also goes into the shadow. Some of the pure gold of our personality is relegated to the shadow because it can find no place in the great leveling process that is our culture." Further he writes, "Any repair of a fractured world must start with individuals who have the insight and courage to own their shadow." The tendency to see one's shadow out there, in one's neighbor or in another race or culture, is the most dangerous aspect of the modern psyche. It has created the devastating wars of this century. Even now, we all decry war, but collectively, we move towards it. It is not the monsters of the world who make such chaos, but the collective shadow to which every one of us has contributed. In this last quote, we see clearly wherein lies the biggest danger. If we are solely identified with our ego and ignorant of what goes on below the surface of consciousness, we will lay the disowned parts of ourselves at the feet of the outside world. We will project them. Now that we understand what the shadow in us encompasses, let us look more closely on the mechanism of projection, how it is triggered and what its distinctive steps are. But instead of exploring shadow projection on the global scale with its consequences of warfare and scapegoating, I want to shift the focus to a more personal and intimate level, to the way we fall in love. Robert A. Johnson calls the projections we make when we are romantically attracted to someone the most powerful and valuable. It happens then that we attach the very best and golden in us to someone else. When I look back at some of my romantic relationships, especially those I had in my early 20s, all of them were heavily influenced by my projections. During this time, I struggled with anxiety and self-doubt. One of the key messages I carried with me was an underlying feeling of not being enough. So I ran through my life, never being able to truly rest and find peace in and for myself. But then, when I turned 20, something incredible happened. I met a girl, and in her presence, maybe for the first time, I felt truly fulfilled. My racing mind would stop, whereas usually I could picture at least 10 different places where I would rather be. With her, it was different. Through her, I touched love and contentment, feelings I wasn't able to allow in myself. As a result, I deeply fell in love with her. Or to be more precise, I fell in love with the way she made me feel. I became addicted to being with her, as only in those moments, something I had longed for all my life became graspable. In all of this, I never really saw her though, only the shots of myself I wanted to see. Besides, what an incredible weight I placed on her shoulders, she fully responsible for my happiness and joy. Naturally, she was not willing to carry these projections for long and ended our relationship. What followed was one of the most painful heartbreaks of my life, because even though we were no longer dating, I still firmly held on to the image I had created of her. Over the next years, I repeated this pattern several times, always idolizing the other, thereby becoming blind to the actual human being right in front of me. All those encounters ended either with me being rejected or with a slowly spreading disappointment from my side, as I realized that the other person was vastly different from the perfect image I had placed over her. I hope this glimpse into my personal life helps to illustrate through which cycle each projection moves. It all starts with some unconscious energy leaving us and attaching itself to a specific person or pursuit. Something that is capable of holding the projection, at least for a while. We think that we are engaging with another human being, getting to know him or her, but what we are really encountering are the disowned parts of ourselves. This first stage, often filled with excitement and emotional intensity, can be quite blissful. But what inevitably follows is the experience of dissonance. Because the other is indeed other, there will come a point after which the discrepancy between the image we project and the underlying reality cannot be denied. The usual response then, if the whole projection mechanism still works unconsciously, is to assume that the problem is out there with the other person. This can lead to various forms of controlling or passive-aggressive behaviors in our intimate relationships. We try to bend the other into the form of our projections, or lash out when they fall short of them. If this tension continues, the projection collapses and the relationship breaks down. Without the projection clouding our vision, we are left stunned by what we now see. Shocked, we wind up blaming each other for being so different, leaving us ruminating how we could have been so wrong in falling for that person in the first place, telling ourselves that we never really knew them. And in a sense, that is profoundly true. But not because they deceived us. No, because we never actually looked at them. We only saw long-lost parts of ourselves. If this whole process goes on entirely unconsciously, and if we still hold true to the belief that we are not responsible for the reoccurring patterns in our life, we will simply renew the projection on another person, starting the whole cycle all over again. But sometimes, if the pain of the collapsed projection is severe enough, and if we dare to own what is happening, we can begin to ask the right questions. How am I responsible for this? What did I put out on you? To honestly embody and live these questions, means to cross the threshold from projection as a merely unconscious mechanism to raising the whole issue to the level of consciousness. For Carl Jung, this was the crucial step. In volume 13 of his collected works, he writes the following: "The psychological rule says that when an inner situation is not made conscious, it comes to us from the outside, and we will call it fate. So long as we choose to turn a blind eye to our shadow, it is free to act from below the surface, dictating our behavior, our perceptions, our emotional responses. It is from there that the shadow will cause the most suffering in our lives and in those of the people close to us. Over and over again will we run into the same situations, tempted to blame the cruel, uncaring world. But the moment we realize that what feels like fate is a result of our own unconscious dynamics, we can break its hold on us. What we are asked for then is to bring all those misplaced and neglected parts of ourselves into the light of consciousness. This is the diligent work of inner reconciliation. Only when we are ready to engage in the humbling process of integrating our shadow, will we be no longer prone to project it. With this, we are not just liberating ourselves, it also becomes the basis for a genuine connection with another person. The movies that capture such a way of relating to someone most truthfully are those of the Before trilogy by Richard Linklater. Across the three films, we witness a growth of a romantic relationship, from the intense idealism of first love into a more grounded, human form of loving. In the first film, Before Sunrise, we meet Celine and Jesse as they are riding a train from Budapest to Vienna. Both are traveling alone and, due to an initial affection, engage in conversation. When the train passes through Vienna, Jesse has to disembark to catch his flight on the next day back to the United States. Spontaneously, he asks Celine to join him, and the two spend the night together wandering the streets of Vienna. During the whole movie, we never leave the intimacy of Celine and Jesse's encounter. The rest of the world fades into the background as we watch them getting to know each other. In the small moments, when their gaze lingers, when they touch and kiss, we witness the magic and wonder of truly connecting with another human being for the first time. In one scene, Celine gives voice to what I consider to be the philosophical basis for the whole trilogy.
You know, I believe if there's any kind of God, it wouldn't be in any of us. Not you or me, but just this little space in between. If there's any kind of magic in this world, it must be in the attempt of understanding someone, sharing something. I know, it's almost impossible to succeed, but who cares, really? The answer must be in the attempt.
In many ways, everything that follows, in Before Sunset and especially Before Midnight, is the unfolding of this attempt and the deep shadow work required for an ongoing relationship. It is the attempt to go past the alluring illusions of one's own projections, to come in contact with the astounding reality that is the other person. By the time of the third movie, Celine and Jesse have been married for several years. They have 2 children together, and what began as a dreamy romance between 2 people in their early 20s has become a complex relationship. During the course of the movie, we follow them on one of their final days of their summer vacation in Greece. Whereas the first movie featured exclusively Celine and Jesse, the scope has now broadened to include their children and friends. Everything is much more centered around the practicalities of everyday life. In their initial dialogue, they no longer talk about abstract ideas as God or the transitory nature of all existence, but about new job opportunities or the prospect of moving to a different country. As the movie progresses, Celine and Jesse are gifted some rare time alone by their friends. In the scenes that follow, they walk through the streets of the old Greek town, and it becomes apparent how long it must have been since they had such a moment just for themselves. When they arrive at the hotel, they start getting intimate with each other until, triggered by a small remark, the whole mood flips completely. In the subsequent fight, all the accumulated tensions and unresolved grievances of the last years are laid bare. Multiple times the conflict seems to be resolved, only for a new issue to flare up. After my first viewing, I was stunned how the movie managed to capture the raw chaos of such an argument on screen. It is messy, at times full of bitterness and stored up accusations, but then also touched by humor and small moments of affection. It is easy for a story to focus on the theme of falling in love or even on rekindling a lost connection, but what it takes to stay in a committed relationship is most often deemed unromantic and brushed off. But it is precisely this last part which challenges us all the most, for it requires ongoing, humbling effort. Robert Johnson writes, "In falling in love, we must also come to terms with what we find annoying and distasteful, even downright intolerable, in the other and also in ourselves. Yet it is precisely this confrontation that leads to our greatest growth. Step by step, we have to ground our love, thereby starting to see, for the first time, the profound reality that is the other person. When we are spending our life together with someone, inevitably there will be confrontation. The question then becomes, do we take the easy way out, or do we have the courage to face what is coming up? This is why the awareness and integration of our shadow is so crucial, for only then will we not be prone to blame our partner for our own lack. In the end of Before Midnight, Celine and Jesse are sitting in a small bar at the harbor. The intensity of their argument has faded, and both are visibly shaken by what just happened. What Jesse then says has stayed with me ever since.
But if you want true love, then this is it. This is real life. It's not perfect, but it's real. And if you can't see it, then you're blind.
All right, I give up.
These words go to the heart of this essay. They embody the sacred attempt to go beyond the allure of fantasy, taking back, step by step, each of our projections. What we will see underneath will be overwhelming, even frightening at times, but also more beautiful than we could ever have dreamed of. Love then is not the absence of conflict or the clinging to perfect, static images. But love is a mutual unfolding of two beings that dare to be vulnerable and open. It exists in this little space between, and if we choose to live in its light, we shall be able to see, even in the dark.